The eighth translator had just walked out of the imperial suite in tears, leaving Prince Rashid al-Zahrani 1 hour away from the biggest diplomatic failure of his career. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us what city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Prince Rashid stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his suite at the Pinnacle Grand Hotel, his reflection sharp against the Chicago skyline. His jaw was clenched so tight it ached. Behind him, Lady Nadine al-Bashir, his senior diplomatic advisor, stood with her arms crossed and her expression carefully neutral. "That's 8 professional translators in 6 hours, Your Highness," Nadine said, her tone suggesting she'd predicted this outcome all along. "Perhaps we should consider postponing the signing." Rashid spun around. "Postpone? The Morrison Energy delegation is waiting downstairs right now. The contract signing is in 3 hours. My father will receive news of this failure before sunset." "Then perhaps Your Highness should have been more selective about which dialect to negotiate in." The words were polite, but the criticism was clear. Rashid felt his temper flare. "I speak the language of my mother, the language of my people. If these so-called professional translators can't handle Hadrami Arabic, that's their failure, not mine." "Hadrami is spoken by fewer than 100,000 people in the world," Nadine replied. "Most translators learn modern standard Arabic. The dialect you insist on using under stress is, forgive me, obscure." "It's not obscure. It's authentic." Rashid turned back to the window. "Every time these negotiations get difficult, every time the pressure builds, I slip into the language my mother taught me. I can't help it. And every single translator freezes like a deer in headlights." Nadine checked her watch. "The Americans are growing impatient. Mr. Morrison has already sent 3 messages asking about the delay." "Then find me someone who speaks Hadrami," Rashid snapped. "In the next hour? In Chicago?" Nadine's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Your Highness, I'm good, but I'm not a miracle worker." In the hallway outside the imperial suite, Layla Qasim pushed her cleaning cart slowly past the door. It was standing open and voices drifted out, angry voices speaking in Arabic. She'd learned long ago to make herself invisible when cleaning the luxury suites. Rich people said things in front of housekeepers they'd never say in front of equals. They talked about deals and divorces and secrets, never thinking the woman scrubbing their bathtub might understand every word. But this was different. This wasn't modern standard Arabic. This was Hadrami. Layla's hand froze on her cart. She hadn't heard her home dialect in 3 years, not since she'd fled Yemen. Not since the last video call with her siblings in the refugee camp, when the connection had been so bad she could barely make out their faces. The prince inside the suite was speaking pure Hadrami, the exact accent from the southern valleys of Hadramaut. He was frustrated, mixing in English phrases, but every few sentences he'd revert completely to the dialect of her childhood. "This is impossible," the prince was saying in Hadrami. "My father will see this as proof I'm not ready to lead. 3 months of negotiations and it all falls apart because no one can understand me when I'm under pressure." Layla's fellow housekeeper, Maria, appeared at the end of the hallway. "Layla, you okay? You've been standing there for like 5 minutes." "I'm fine," Layla said quietly. "Just waiting for the suite to clear out. Girl, stay away from the royal guests, nothing but trouble. I heard 8 translators quit today. Can you imagine? Whatever they're paying, it's not enough." Maria wheeled her cart past. "Come on, we've got 6 more rooms on this floor." But Layla didn't move. She was doing calculations in her head, dangerous calculations. She needed money, desperately. Her siblings, 15-year-old Yasmin and 13-year-old Omar, were in a refugee camp in Jordan. The monthly stipend she sent them was late, again. She was behind on her own rent, behind on everything, and inside that suite was a prince who needed something she could provide. It was insane. She was a hotel maid. You didn't just walk up to royalty and offer your services. You stayed invisible. You kept your head down. You survived. But survival was exactly why she was considering this. Inside the suite, Nadine's voice rose. Your Highness, I'm calling your father. We need to postpone this signing. There's no other option. No. Rashid's voice was flat. I will not admit defeat before I've even tried. Then what do you suggest? Should I go downstairs and tell Mr. Morrison that we need more time because you insist on speaking a village dialect? Don't call it that, Rashid said, and his voice was cold now. My mother spoke that village dialect. The men who built my country's wealth spoke it. It's the language of real people doing real work, not palace politics. Nadine sighed. Your mother would also tell you that being crown prince means making practical choices. Sometimes that means speaking in ways others can understand. Or it means finding someone who understands me. Layla took a deep breath. This was a terrible idea. The worst idea she'd had in a long time. She knocked on the doorframe. A security guard appeared immediately, blocking her entry. Suite is closed. Come back later. I need to speak with His Highness, Layla said. The guard almost laughed. The prince doesn't take meetings with housekeeping. Move along. Layla switched to Hadrami. Her voice was clear and steady. Your Highness, forgive the interruption, but I understand your difficulty. I can help with your translation problem. The suite went completely silent. Rashid appeared behind the security guard, his eyes wide with shock. He stared at Layla like she'd just spoken in ancient Greek. What did you just say? He asked, and his voice was barely above a whisper. Layla met his eyes. I said I can help. Your translators don't speak Hadrami. I do. Nadine appeared beside Rashid. What language is that? Hadrami, Rashid said, still staring at Layla. She just spoke perfect Hadrami. He switched to the dialect, addressing Layla directly. Who are you? My name is Layla Qasim, she replied in the same dialect. I work here at the hotel. As what? A consultant? A translator? As a housekeeper. Nadine made a sound of disbelief. Your Highness, this is ridiculous. We can't. Rashid held up his hand, silencing her. He stepped closer to Layla, studying her face. Then he spoke in rapid Hadrami, using phrases and idioms that only someone from the region would know. He was testing her. If you truly speak Hadrami, tell me what we call the afternoon prayer wind in the Wadi Hadramaut. Nasim al-Asr, Layla replied without hesitation. The prayer breeze. It comes from the east when the canyon shadows lengthen, carrying the scent of frankincense from the mountains. Rashid's expression shifted from suspicion to wonder. How does a hotel housekeeper know that? Because I'm not just a hotel housekeeper, Your Highness. My name is Layla Qasim, daughter of Hassan Qasim. My father was a petroleum engineer in Hadramaut. I grew up in the Wadi near Shabam. I have a degree in international business from the University of Aden. I speak 5 languages fluently, including Hadrami and English. I understand petroleum industry terminology because I learned it at my father's dinner table. And I'm cleaning hotel rooms because wars don't care about credentials and American employers don't recognize Yemeni degrees. The suite was silent again. Rashid just stared at her. Nadine recovered first. This is completely inappropriate. She's a hotel employee. We can't possibly... Can you start in 30 minutes? Rashid asked, cutting Nadine off without looking at her. Layla didn't hesitate. Yes, Your Highness. Wait in the conference room on this floor. My assistant will brief you on the terms. He turned to Nadine. Prepare the contract. Standard rate for professional translation services. Your Highness, this is highly irregular. Everything about this day has been irregular, Lady Nadine. At least this irregularity might actually work. Rashid looked back at Layla. Don't make me regret this, Miss Qasim. I won't, Your Highness. Layla turned and walked back to her cleaning cart, her hands trembling slightly. Behind her, she heard Nadine's sharp voice rising in protest and Rashid's firm replies. She'd just changed everything. For better or worse, her life would never be the same. Maria appeared from a nearby room. Girl, what did you just do? I have no idea, Layla said honestly, but I'm about to find out. 20 minutes. Later, Layla stood in a private office adjacent to Rashid's suite, trying to calm her racing heart. She'd changed out of her cleaning uniform and into the only professional outfit she owned, a simple black blazer and pants she kept in her locker for job interviews that never seemed to lead anywhere. Rashid entered, closing the door behind him. He'd changed too, now wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than Layla made in 6 months. He sat across from her, his expression unreadable. Let's discuss terms, he said in English. If this negotiation succeeds, I'll pay you $10,000. Layla had been expecting maybe 1,000, 2,000 if she was lucky. 10,000 would solve so many problems. But she'd also learned something important over 3 years of survival. Never accept the first offer. The standard rate for professional translation services on a deal of this magnitude is $50,000. Layla said calmly. That's my rate. Rashid's eyebrows rose. You're negotiating? Before you've even started? You need me more than I need to please you, Your Highness. That's called leverage. For the first time since they'd met, Rashid almost smiled. You have courage, Miss Qasim, I'll give you that. He leaned back in his chair. 40,000. 50,000. You've been through 8 translators today. How much have you already spent on failed attempts? How much will it cost your country if this deal falls through? 50,000 is a bargain and we both know it. Rashid studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Done. 50,000 if we close the deal. But I have rules. I assumed you would. You stay in the background during negotiations. You translate exactly what I say. No interpretation, no addition, no editorial comments. You don't speak unless spoken to directly. And most importantly, you don't embarrass me in front of the Americans. Can you do that? Layla met his eyes. I can do all of that, Your Highness. The question is, will you let me? What does that mean? It means that translation isn't just about words. It's about context, culture, and intention. If I see the negotiation heading toward a cultural misunderstanding that could derail everything, I'll need to speak up. Otherwise, what's the point of having a translator who understands both sides? Rashid was quiet for a moment. You're very sure of yourself. I'm very sure of my skills. There's a difference. Why do you need the money? The question was abrupt, personal. Layla hesitated. She could lie, keep it vague. But something about Rashid's directness made her want to be equally direct. I have 2 younger siblings in a refugee camp in Jordan. Yasmin is 15. Omar is 13. I send them $800 a month for food, medicine, and the tutoring that keeps them from falling too far behind in school. I'm currently 3 months behind on those payments because I had to choose between feeding them and keeping my own apartment. $50,000 would catch me up, give me breathing room, and maybe, let me start the process of bringing them here. Rashid's expression softened slightly. Your parents? Dead. My father was killed in the war. My mother died of illness 6 months later. I'm all they have. I'm sorry. I don't need your pity, Your Highness. I need your $50,000. Do we have a deal or not? Rashid stood and extended his hand. We have a deal, Miss Qasim. Don't make me regret this. Layla shook his hand. I could say the same to you. The executive conference room on the 31st floor had been set up for what was supposed to be a triumphant signing ceremony. Instead, it looked like a disaster zone. Water glasses were scattered across the table, abandoned translator notes were crumpled in corners, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Energy Group, sat at one end of the long table with his team. 3 lawyers, 2 petroleum engineers, and a financial analyst. They all looked tired and annoyed. At the other end sat Rashid's delegation, 2 advisors, a legal consultant, and Lady Nadine, who was watching Layla with cold, assessing eyes. Rashid entered with Layla following a respectful step behind. He took his seat at the head of the table, and Layla sat in the chair behind him, notebook ready. Morrison stood. "Your Highness, I hope this translator will be more successful than the previous ones. We've been very patient, but we do have a timeline to keep." "Miss Kasim is fully qualified," Rashid said. "Shall we begin?" Morrison looked at Layla with open curiosity. "What's your background, Miss Kasim?" "International business from the University of Aden, with specialization in petroleum sector negotiations," Layla said. "University of Aden. You're Yemeni." "I am." "And you speak Hadrami?" Morrison's tone suggested he'd been briefed on the problem. "I grew up in Hadramaut. It's my first language." Morrison nodded, apparently satisfied. "Well, let's see how this goes. We've got a lot of ground to cover." The first hour went smoothly. Rashid and Morrison discussed the basic framework of their partnership. Morrison Energy would provide drilling technology and infrastructure expertise, while Zaran would provide access to its offshore oil fields. It was a standard arrangement, and Layla translated efficiently, capturing not just words but tone and intention. "His Highness wants to ensure environmental protections are written into the core contract," Layla translated, "not as an addendum. In Gulf culture, this isn't just about legal compliance, it's about honoring the land that provides for the people. The prince sees this as a moral obligation, not merely a contractual clause." Morrison leaned forward. "That's exactly the kind of clarity we needed. The previous translators made it sound like just another legal requirement. We understand now. This is personal to His Highness." One of Morrison's lawyers nodded. "That context changes how we should frame the language. Thank you, Miss Kasim." From the side of the room, Nadine shifted in her seat, her expression tight. An hour into negotiations, the discussion shifted to technical specifications. Morrison's chief petroleum engineer, a man named Dr. Chen, pulled out geological surveys and drilling projections. "We're looking at horizontal drilling in the Zagros Formation," Dr. Chen explained. "Based on our surveys, we estimate a yield of 50,000 barrels per day from the secondary reservoir alone. The primary reservoir should produce considerably more." Layla translated into Arabic, then added, "Your Highness, he's referring to what your father's original surveys called the deep pocket, the same formation that produced exceptional yields in the northern fields 20 years ago." Rashid turned to look at her, surprised. "You know our field surveys?" "My father worked those fields for 15 years, Your Highness. I grew up reading his maps and reports. The deep pocket is the reservoir beneath the Al-Khalij Formation. It's been promising for decades but required horizontal drilling technology that wasn't cost-effective until recently." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "You're familiar with the Al-Khalij structure?" "Very familiar. My father, Hassan Qasim, was senior petroleum engineer for Zaran National Petroleum Company from 1992 to 2008. He was part of the team that first identified the deep pocket reservoir." Morrison set down his pen. "Wait, your father worked the Zaran fields?" "He did, before the conflicts made it impossible to continue." There was a moment of respectful silence. Everyone at the table understood what the conflicts meant. Yemen's civil war had destroyed careers, companies, and countless lives. Morrison looked at Rashid. Your Highness, where exactly did you find Miss Qasim? She knows more about your fields than some of our own engineers. Miss Qasim found me, actually, Rashid said, and there was something new in his voice. Respect. And I'm beginning to realize how fortunate that was. During the mid-morning break, Nadine positioned herself near the refreshment table, speaking quietly with another member of Rashid's delegation. Layla overheard as she poured herself coffee. This is absurd, Nadine murmured. A hotel maid translating billion-dollar deals. The advisor, a younger man named Khalil, glanced at Layla nervously. To be fair, Lady Nadine, she's doing better than the 8 certified professionals we hired. That's not the point. She has no credentials, no official standing. What if she makes a mistake? What if she misrepresents something critical? She hasn't yet. Yet being the operative word. Nadine's eyes narrowed. I intend to find out exactly who Layla Qasim really is. Layla turned away from the table without acknowledging that. She'd heard. She'd dealt with people like Nadine before, people who saw credentials as more important than competence, who valued titles over talent. She'd proved Nadine wrong the same way she'd proven everyone else wrong, by being undeniably good at her job. Back in the conference room, the negotiation hit its first major obstacle. Morrison's legal team had drafted a contract clause about operational flexibility that sounded reasonable in English. But when Layla began translating it into Arabic, she stopped. Mr. Morrison, she said carefully, before I translate that clause, I need to explain something. Morrison looked up. What's wrong? The phrasing you've used, Morrison Energy will maintain operational flexibility to optimize production schedules based on market conditions, is standard language in American contracts. But in Gulf culture and Arabic translation, this phrasing implies that Zaran would be a subordinate partner with no real control over their own resources. It's not just insulting, it's completely unacceptable. The room went silent. Rashid was staring at Layla with intense focus. Morrison's lead lawyer frowned. That's not what we meant at all. We just need flexibility to adjust production based on market demands, standard industry practice. I understand, Layla said, but language matters. In this context, operational flexibility translates in a way that suggests Iran would have no voice in decisions about their own oil. It implies colonial dynamics that Gulf nations are extremely sensitive about. Morrison looked alarmed. We absolutely don't mean that. We see this as an equal partnership. Then let me suggest alternative phrasing, Layla said. Instead of Morrison Energy will maintain operational flexibility, and what if we say, both parties will collaborate on production scheduling to optimize market response while respecting Zaran's sovereign authority over resource management. It achieves your goal without the cultural problem, Morrison's lawyer typed quickly on his laptop. That works. That actually works better for us too. It clarifies the partnership nature of the relationship. Rashid spoke in Hadrami, his voice quiet. You just prevented a diplomatic disaster, Layla responded in the same dialect. That's why you hired me, Your Highness. Morrison looked between them. I'm glad you two can communicate so effectively. The previous translators seemed to be missing about half of what His Highness was trying to convey. The previous translators learned Arabic from textbooks, Layla said. I learned it from living. There's a difference. During the lunch break, Morrison approached Layla in the hospitality room. She was standing near the window looking out at the Chicago skyline and trying to process the morning's success. Miss Qasim, Morrison said, do you have a moment? Layla turned. Of course, Mr. Morrison. I wanted to thank you personally. That contract language, none of our team caught that cultural issue. You saved us from making a major mistake. Just doing my job. It's more than that. Morrison studied her with genuine interest. You have an unusual combination of skills: language fluency, cultural expertise, technical knowledge of the petroleum industry, and the diplomatic sense to know when to speak up. That's rare. Thank you. Where did you study cultural negotiation? I assume you had training beyond your business degree. Layla smiled slightly. I learned at my father's dinner table mostly. He spent 20 years negotiating international contracts. I absorbed it by watching and listening. And now you're translating? Do you work for a major firm? There was a slight pause. This was the moment where Layla could craft a more impressive story. But she'd learned that lies always caught up with you eventually. I work independently, she said. I take contracts as they come. Morrison nodded. Smart. Keep your independence. Then he hesitated. Though I have to say you're far too talented to be. He stopped, realizing he was about to say something presumptuous. Too talented to be what, Mr. Morrison? Never mind. I'm just very impressed with your work. He walked away, leaving Layla standing by the window. She knew what he'd almost said. Too talented to be cleaning hotel rooms. But he didn't know her story. He didn't know that talent didn't matter when your degree came from a war zone, when your country was on travel ban lists, when your visa status was uncertain, and when American employers saw Yemen on your resume and stopped reading. She turned back to the window. $50,000. That's what mattered right now. Everything else was just noise. In the hallway outside the conference room, Rashid pulled Layla aside. His advisors had gone ahead, leaving them briefly alone. Miss Qasim, I need to ask you something. Yes, Your Highness? Your father, Hassan Qasim, what happened to him? Layla's expression tightened. He was killed in 2015 during the conflict. Wrong place, wrong time. A strike hit the building where he was working. Rashid was quiet for a moment. And your mother? Died 6 months later. Illness, but really it was heartbreak. She gave up after we lost my father. I'm sorry, truly. It was a long time ago. Layla's voice was matter-of-fact, but Rashid could hear the carefully controlled emotion underneath. So you came to America alone with your siblings? Just me. They were stuck in processing for 2 more years. They're still waiting in Jordan. The visa system moves slowly when you're refugees from Yemen. Rashid looked like he wanted to say something more, but Nadine appeared at the end of the hallway. Your Highness, the Americans are ready to resume. We'll be right there. Rashid turned back to Layla. Thank you for what you're doing today. Not just the translation, the way you're doing it. You're paying me $50,000. I should be thanking you. It's not about the money. You prevented a disaster in there. You saw something no one else saw. That's because I understand both worlds, Your Highness. I've lived in yours. My father worked in petroleum for Gulf companies. And I've lived in mine, trying to survive in America as an unwanted refugee. I see the gaps between cultures because I've fallen into them enough times. Rashid studied her face. You're remarkable, Miss Qasim. I'm practical, Your Highness. There's a difference. They walked back to the conference room together. Nadine watched them from her position near the door, her eyes calculating. And in that moment, though none of them knew it yet, the real complications were just beginning. The afternoon session began with the most contentious issue: profit-sharing percentages. This was where the previous negotiations had repeatedly stalled, and where emotions ran highest on both sides. Morrison opened with his position. We're proposing a 55-45 split. Morrison Energy takes 55% to account for our technology investment, infrastructure costs, and operational expertise. Zaran receives 45% as the resource owner. Layla translated into Arabic for Rashid. His jaw tightened immediately. Tell Mr. Morrison that we require a 60-40 split in Zaran's favor, Rashid said in measured Arabic. We are the resource owners. Our oil, our territory, our sovereign rights. But as the negotiation grew more heated, Rashid began slipping into Hadrami. His stress was showing, and with it came the dialect of his childhood. They want our oil at peasant prices and call it partnership, he said in rapid Hadrami, his frustration boiling over. This is exactly what my father warned me about. Western companies who smile while they rob us. The Americans looked confused. They couldn't understand a word. Layla remained calm. She translated to Morrison in English, her tone diplomatic. His Highness feels that a 55-45 split doesn't adequately reflect Zaran's position as the resource owner. In Gulf culture, there's a saying, the one who owns the land owns the harvest. He's concerned that the proposed split doesn't honor that principle. Morrison nodded. I understand his concern, but we're bringing significant capital investment. Layla switched to Hadrami, speaking directly to Rashid. Your Highness, he's not trying to insult you. In American business culture, capital investment carries enormous weight in partnership calculations. They genuinely see their technology and infrastructure as equivalent to resource ownership. It's a different value system, not a deliberate slight. Rashid took a breath, visibly calming himself. He responded in formal Arabic. Then explained to Mr. Morrison that previous partnerships between Zaran and Western firms have established a 60-40 precedent. We cannot accept less without undermining those existing agreements. It would damage our credibility with other partners, Layla translated. His Highness notes that there's regional precedent for 60-40 splits in similar partnerships. Consistency matters for Zaran's broader international relationships. If this partnership sets a new, lower standard, it could force renegotiation of existing contracts. Morrison's expression changed. Ah, that's a much more concrete argument than what we were hearing before. The precedent issue is significant. He conferred briefly with his team. We can work with 60-40 if we adjust some of the operational cost structures. Rashid leaned back slightly, surprised by how quickly Morrison had moved. He glanced at Layla with something that looked like gratitude. You turned my anger into a business argument, he said quietly in Hadrami. That's what good translation is, Your Highness, Layla replied in the same dialect. Not just words. Intent. An hour later, Morrison's lead attorney decided to test Layla's expertise. He was a sharp man in his 60s named Gerald Fitzpatrick, and he clearly didn't like that a translator was adding her own context to discussions. Let's talk about arbitration protocols, Fitzpatrick said, his tone deliberately complex. Clause 7 requires adherence to ICSID arbitration frameworks under Article 25, Paragraph 1 jurisdiction, with specific carve-outs for OPEC regulatory compliance per the 1960 statute provisions. He sat back, clearly expecting Layla to stumble over the technical legal jargon. Layla translated the clause into Arabic for Rashid, then added, Your Highness, he's discussing international arbitration rules. However, OPEC Article 2, Section C actually supersedes ICSID protocols in cases involving production quotas or pricing disputes. We should add explicit language clarifying that OPEC regulations take precedence over ICSID in those specific circumstances. Rashid nodded. Agreed. Make sure that's in writing. Fitzpatrick's eyes widened. You're familiar with OPEC statutory provisions? Articles 2 through 8, yes, Layla said calmly. They governed my father's contracts for 20 years. He made me read them when I was 15 because he said anyone in the petroleum business needed to understand the regulatory framework. I found them incredibly boring at the time, but they stuck. Fitzpatrick actually smiled. I've been practicing energy law for 35 years and I still find them boring. But you're absolutely right about Article 2C. That's a critical distinction most translators would have missed. Morrison looked at Rashid with something like envy. Your Highness, I'm genuinely curious. Where did you find Miss Qasim? She knows more about petroleum law than some of our own legal team. Miss Qasim found me, actually, Rashid said. I'm beginning to think I should stop questioning good fortune when it appears. From her position at the side of the room, Nadine's expression grew colder. As the afternoon stretched into early evening, Nadine made her move. She stood abruptly, interrupting a discussion about environmental compliance standards. I apologize for the interruption, Nadine said, her voice cutting through the conversation. But I must raise a procedural concern. Everyone turned to look at her. Miss Qasim is performing admirably, Nadine continued. But I must point out that she has no formal certification as a translator. She's not a member of any professional translation organization. In fact, she's actually employed by this hotel as a housekeeper. I'm concerned about the legal validity of any contract negotiated through an uncertified translator. The room went silent. Layla felt every eye turn toward her. Morrison's team exchanged glances. Rashid's face went dangerously blank. Lady Nadine, Rashid said, his voice like ice, you will not question my decisions in front of our guests. Your Highness, I'm only thinking of your interests. You're thinking of your own interests. And your judgment of what qualifies as competence. Rashid stood. Miss Qasim has proven her abilities over the past 6 hours. That's the only certification that matters to me. But Your Highness, the legal implications... Are you suggesting that every word Miss Qasim has translated today is somehow invalid because she doesn't have a piece of paper from an American organization? An organization that probably doesn't even certify Hadrami translators because the language is too obscure for them to bother with? Nadine's mouth opened and closed. She'd clearly expected Rashid to be more diplomatic. Before she could respond, Morrison spoke up. With all due respect to Lady Nadine's concerns, I have to say that Miss Qasim has been the most effective translator Morrison Energy has worked with in any negotiation anywhere in the world. And we operate in 30 countries. Morrison's chief engineer nodded. She understood technical specifications that some of our own engineers struggled to articulate clearly. Fitzpatrick, the lawyer who'd tried to trip her up, added his voice. Her grasp of international petroleum law is better than some partners at my firm. I don't care what her official credentials are. Her actual credentials speak for themselves. Morrison looked directly at Nadine. So whatever concerns you have about certification, they're not shared by the people actually working with Miss Qasim. Her position here is not in question as far as Morrison Energy is concerned. Nadine sat down stiffly, her face flushed. Rashid remained standing. Lady Nadine, you're dismissed from this room. You may wait in the suite. Your Highness, that was not a request. Nadine stood and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The door closed behind her with a definitive thud. Rashid turned to Layla. Miss Qasim, my apologies for that interruption. Please continue. Layla nodded, her expression calm despite her racing heart. She'd just watched a crown prince publicly dismiss his senior advisor in her defense. That meant something. She wasn't sure what yet, but it meant something. During the next break, Morrison approached Layla in the hallway. His manner was different now, not just friendly but purposeful. Miss Qasim, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Of course. They moved to a quieter corner. Morrison pulled out his business card and a pen, writing something on the back. "I want to make you an offer," he said. "And I want to be very clear that this is genuine, not some negotiation tactic or attempt to poach you from His Highness." Layla's heart began to race. "What kind of offer?" "Director of Middle East Relations for Morrison Energy. You'd oversee all our Gulf partnerships, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, and of course Iran. You'd have a team of 20 people reporting to you. The position pays $250,000 to start, with performance bonuses that could push it above $300,000. Layla felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. $250,000. That was more money than she'd imagined earning in 5 years. "Mr. Morrison, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. We'd sponsor your visa, H-1B specialist visa, path to permanent residency. We'd pay for any additional certifications or credentials you want to pursue. You'd have full benefits, including the ability to bring family members to the United States under dependent visas." "Family members?" Layla's voice was barely a whisper. "Your siblings. If you took this position, we could bring your brother and sister here within 6 months. Morrison Energy has an excellent immigration attorney on retainer." Layla felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back quickly. "This is an incredible offer. You're an incredible talent. The truth is, Miss Qasim, you're wasted." He stopped himself. "Wasted cleaning hotel rooms?" Layla finished for him. "You can say it, it's true." "I was going to say wasted not doing exactly this kind of work full-time. You have a gift for bridging cultures. That's rare and valuable." He handed her the card. "Think about it. Here's my direct line. Call me when you decide. The offer stands regardless of how today ends." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I'll seriously consider it." "Please do. We need people like you." Morrison walked back toward the conference room. Layla stood in the hallway, staring at the business card like it was a winning lottery ticket. $250,000. Her siblings here in 6 months. A real career. Respect. Everything she'd been fighting for since she'd arrived in America 3 years ago. She looked up and saw Rashid standing at the other end of the hallway. He'd clearly witnessed the entire conversation. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. Layla slipped the card into her pocket and walked toward him. "We should get back to the negotiation, Your Highness." Rashid didn't move. "What did Morrison offer you?" "A job opportunity." "What kind of job?" "The kind that would change my life." Layla met his eyes. "Is that a problem?" "You're working for me right now." "You hired me for one negotiation, Your Highness. Once this deal is signed, our agreement is complete. I'm free to consider any opportunities I choose." "I assumed you'd continue working with me." "You assumed wrong." Layla kept her voice level but firm. "I'm grateful for this opportunity, truly. But I make my own decisions about my future." Morrison appeared in the doorway of the conference room. "Your Highness, Miss Qasim, we're ready to resume if you are." "We'll be right there," Rashid said, not taking his eyes off Layla. Morrison disappeared back into the room, clearly amused by the tension he was witnessing. "You're not taking Morrison's offer," Rashid said quietly. Layla felt a flash of anger. "Excuse me? He's only interested because you're talented. He'll use your skills and give you nothing in return except money." "As opposed to you?" Layla's voice was sharp now. "Who needed me to save your negotiation and now thinks he has some claim on my future? That's not what I—" "What are you trying to say, Your Highness? Because it sounds like you're treating me like property. Like something you purchased along with the translation services." "I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need respect. And respect means acknowledging that I have the right to make my own choices about my career, my life, and my future." They stood in the hallway, the tension between them crackling like electricity. "Do you know what I think?" Layla continued, her voice quieter but no less intense. "I think you walked past me every day for 6 months while I cleaned your suite. You saw me, but you didn't see me. Not until you desperately needed something. That's not respect, Your Highness. That's convenience." Rashid looked like she'd slapped him. "Is that what you think? That you're convenient? What else should I think? Yesterday I was invisible. Today I'm indispensable. Tomorrow, when this deal is closed, what will I be? You tell me." Before Rashid could answer, one of his advisors appeared. "Your Highness, the Americans are waiting." "We'll be right there," Rashid said, his voice rough. Layla walked past him into the conference room, her head high and her heart pounding. The evening session was tense but productive. Both sides were tired, but they could sense they were close to agreement. Layla translated mechanically, professionally, keeping her personal feelings locked away. During a particularly stressful exchange about payment schedules, Layla noticed Rashid rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted, drained. Without thinking, she slipped out of the room during a brief recess. She returned 10 minutes later with a small cup of Arabic coffee, prepared exactly the Hadrami way, with cardamom from the southern regions, not the northern blend. She'd had to charm one of the hotel kitchen staff to get the right ingredients, but she'd managed. She set the cup quietly beside Rashid. He looked at it, then at her, surprise clear on his face. "You made this?" he asked in Hadrami. "The hotel kitchen had the ingredients. I thought it might help." Rashid lifted the cup and tasted it. His eyes widened. "This is perfect. Exactly how my mother makes it. Cardamom from the south, not the north. The ratio is different. Most people don't know the distinction." "How did you know?" "I grew up there, Your Highness. Some things you don't forget." Their eyes met across the table. For a moment, the anger and tension from the hallway melted away, replaced by something else. Recognition, connection, understanding. Morrison noticed the exchange. "Everything all right?" "Yes," Rashid said, not looking away from Layla. "Everything is fine." They returned to the negotiation, but something had shifted between them, something neither of them was ready to name. As the evening drew toward conclusion, they tackled the final major issue, the timeline for the partnership. Morrison wanted a 15-year commitment. Rashid wanted 25 years to ensure long-term stability. During this discussion, Layla made an observation that shifted everything. "Both sides are talking about duration," she said, addressing the room directly. "But what you're really discussing is trust. Mr. Morrison wants 15 years because American business culture values flexibility and the ability to reassess. His Highness wants 25 years because Gulf culture values long-term relationships and the patience to build something enduring." She paused, making sure everyone was listening. "In Hadramaut we have a saying, Al-Thika tubna hajaran hajaran sanatan bada sana. Trust is built stone by stone, year by year. You don't build a strong house quickly. You build the foundation first, then the walls, then the roof. Each layer takes time." Rashid went completely still. He was staring at Layla with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "What did you say?" he asked in Hadrami. "It's a proverb about trust. I know what it means. My mother used to say that. Exactly that way, with exactly those words. It's common in the southern valleys. Where exactly did you grow up?" Rashid leaned forward. "You said near Shibam. Where specifically?" "The Wadi Hadramaut, a small village called Al-Qatn." "Why?" Rashid opened his mouth, then closed it. Something was clearly bothering him, some memory he couldn't quite grasp. "No reason. Continue." But Layla noticed he kept watching her with that same intense, searching expression, like he was trying to remember something just out of reach. Morrison broke the moment. Miss Kasim, your proverb actually gives me an idea. What if we structure this as a 15-year partnership with automatic renewal for another 10 years if both parties agree? That gives us flexibility while signaling our intention for long-term commitment. Rashid considered this. And if we want to renew but Morrison Energy doesn't? Then there's a 3-year transition period to ensure smooth handoff of operations. No one gets abandoned suddenly. I can accept that, Rashid said. It honors both values, flexibility and commitment. Fitzpatrick was already typing the new language into the contract. I'll have revised terms ready in 15 minutes. The room relaxed. They could all sense it. The deal was done. 40 minutes later, Rashid and Morrison stood to shake hands. Both men were smiling. The preliminary agreement was signed with full contracts to follow within 30 days. 25-year partnership, Morrison said. 60-40 split. Renewable terms. This is good for both our nations, Your Highness. Agreed. Rashid shook his hand firmly. To a prosperous future. Morrison turned to address the full room. Before we celebrate, I want to say something publicly. Miss Kasim is the reason this deal succeeded. We've been trying to close this partnership for 3 months, and we made more progress today than in all those previous weeks combined. Your Highness, you should seriously consider making her position permanent. I intend to, Mr. Morrison, Rashid said, looking directly at Layla. She felt her face flush under the attention of everyone in the room. Morrison walked over to her and handed her another business card. Remember what I said earlier. The offer stands. You'd be remarkable at Morrison Energy, and I think you know it. Rashid, standing nearby, looked like he wanted to physically remove Morrison from the room. Morrison noticed and smiled slightly. I'll let you two discuss that. Congratulations on a successful negotiation, Miss Kasim. It's been a genuine pleasure working with you. As the Americans gathered their materials and prepared to leave, Layla stood by the window trying to process everything that had just happened. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. $50,000. Her siblings could eat for the next year. She could catch up on rent. She could breathe. But more than that, she'd proven something to herself. She wasn't just a refugee cleaning hotel rooms. She was skilled, valuable, capable of working at the highest levels of international business. Miss Kasim? She turned to find Rashid standing behind her. The conference room had emptied. They were alone. You were extraordinary today, he said quietly. I don't have words for how extraordinary. You're paying me $50,000. That's sufficient words. It's not enough. You didn't just translate. You mediated. You prevented disasters. You made both sides feel heard and respected. That's not translation. That's diplomacy. Thank you, Your Highness. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Rashid said, About Morrison's offer. Your Highness, please don't. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I just want you to know that if you want to continue working with me with Zaran, there's a position available. Official translator for the royal household. You'd handle all our international negotiations. The pay would match Morrison's offer, and it would come with diplomatic credentials. Layla was stunned. You're offering me a permanent position? I'm offering you a choice. Morrison offered you one path. I'm offering another. Take time to think about both. Why? Because you've earned it. Because you're brilliant at what you do, and because... He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. Because what? Because something about you feels familiar, and I can't figure out why. Layla's heart skipped. Familiar how? I don't know. The way you speak Hadrami. The proverbs you use. Something. He shook his head. I'm probably just tired. He turned to leave, then looked back. Thank you for the coffee. It reminded me of home. "You're welcome, Your Highness." After he left, Layla stood alone in the conference room as the sun set over Chicago. She had 2 job offers, $50,000 coming her way, and a crown prince who looked at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. Her life had just changed completely. She just wasn't sure yet if that change would be a blessing or a disaster. The celebration dinner was held in the hotel's grand ballroom that evening. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables draped in white linen. The guest list read like a who's who of international business and Gulf diplomacy, American oil executives, members of Zahran's royal family who'd flown in for the signing, diplomats from 3 embassies, and various business magnates who'd heard about the historic deal. Layla stood near the entrance in the only formal dress she owned, a simple navy blue dress she'd bought at a discount store 2 years ago for a job interview that had gone nowhere. It was elegant enough, but standing in a room full of designer gowns and custom-tailored suits, she felt like a sparrow among peacocks. "Miss Cassim," Morrison waved her over to his table. "Come join us. I want you to meet some people." Layla made her way through the crowd, aware of curious glances following her. People were whispering. The translator who'd saved the deal. The woman who spoke the prince's rare dialect. Nobody seemed to know quite what to make of her. At Morrison's table, she was introduced to the CEO of another energy company, a State Department official, and a professor of Middle Eastern studies from Northwestern. They were all genuinely interested in her work that day. "How did you learn Hadrami?" the professor asked. "I've been studying Arabic dialects for 30 years, and I've never met anyone outside Yemen who speaks it fluently." "I grew up in Hadramaut," Layla explained. "It's my first language." "Fascinating. And your father was in petroleum?" "Senior engineer for Zahran National Petroleum Company. He worked the fields for over 15 years. The conversation was pleasant, respectful. These were people who valued expertise over pedigree. Layla began to relax slightly. Then she saw Rashid enter the ballroom. He was dressed in formal evening wear, traditional Gulf attire that somehow made him look even more imposing. He worked the room with practiced ease, greeting guests, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. But every few minutes his eyes found Layla across the room, and every time their gazes met, something electric passed between them. "He's quite taken with you," Morrison observed quietly. Layla felt her face warm. "He's grateful for the translation work." "That's not gratitude in his eyes, Miss Cassim. That's something else entirely." Before Layla could respond, Lady Nadine appeared at Morrison's table. She was dressed in an emerald silk gown that probably cost more than Layla made in a year. Her smile was sharp as glass. "Mr. Morrison, Miss Cassim, I hope you're enjoying the celebration." "We are, thank you," Morrison said coolly. He clearly hadn't forgiven Nadine for her earlier behavior. Nadine's eyes focused on Layla. "Miss Cassim, you must be quite pleased with yourself. From hotel maid to honored guest in one day. Quite a transformation." The table went quiet. Layla felt every eye turned toward her. "I earned my place here through competent work," Layla said calmly. "Just like everyone else in this room." "Of course you did." Nadine's smile didn't waver. "I'm simply making an observation. It's not every day that housekeeping staff end up dining with royalty." Morrison set down his glass with a sharp click. "Lady Nadine, I think you've made your point. Perhaps you should move along." Nadine glided away, but the damage was done. The people at the table were looking at Layla with new understanding. Hotel maid. That explained the discount dress, the lack of designer accessories, the absence of social connections. "Miss Cassim," the State Department official said carefully. "You work at this hotel?" "I do," Layla said, refusing to sound ashamed. "I work 3 jobs, actually. I clean rooms here, I hostess at a restaurant on weekends, and I teach music online to private students. It's what I do to support my family while I save money for professional certification programs. 3 jobs, the professor repeated. That's remarkable. It's survival, Layla corrected. There's nothing remarkable about doing what you have to do. Morrison raised his glass. I disagree. I think working 3 jobs while maintaining the level of expertise you demonstrated today is extremely remarkable. To Miss Qasim, a woman who knows the value of hard work, the others at the table raised their glasses. The moment passed, but Layla noticed Nadine watching from across the room, her expression calculating. Dinner was served at 8. Layla found herself seated at a table with some of Rashid's delegation and a few American executives. It was an honor placement. She was being treated as someone important. But she could feel eyes on her, hear whispered conversations. Rashid sat at the head table with his family members and the highest-ranking guests, but he kept glancing in her direction, checking on her. Halfway through the main course, Nadine stood. She tapped her champagne glass with a spoon, the sound ringing through the ballroom. Conversations died down. If I may have everyone's attention, Nadine said, her voice carrying, I'd like to propose a toast. Rashid looked up, frowning. This wasn't on the program. Today we celebrate a historic partnership between Zahran and Morrison Energy, Nadine continued. It's a deal that almost didn't happen, as we all know. 8 translators failed to bridge the communication gap. But then at the last moment, salvation appeared from the most unexpected source. Layla's stomach dropped. She knew where this was going. Miss Layla Qasim stepped forward to offer her services, Nadine said, turning to look directly at Layla. And she did extraordinary work. Truly extraordinary. I think everyone would agree that she was essential to today's success. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Rashid was watching Nadine with narrowed eyes. But I believe in full transparency, Nadine continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge. I believe that when we celebrate someone's achievements, we should know the full story. And Miss Qasim's story is quite remarkable. Nadine, Rashid's voice cut across the room. Sit down. In just a moment, Your Highness. I think this is important. Nadine's smile was poisonous. You see, Miss Qasim is not a professional translator. She's not employed by any translation service or consultancy. She works here, at this hotel, as a housekeeper. She cleans rooms, for minimum wage. Shocked whispers filled the ballroom. Layla felt her face burn, but she kept her head high. She's also a Yemeni refugee, Nadine went on relentlessly. She fled the war with nothing. She currently lives in a studio apartment in one of Chicago's least desirable neighborhoods. She sends money to 2 younger siblings who are stuck in a Jordanian refugee camp, and she's chronically behind on those payments. Nadine paused for effect. Now, I don't fault her for needing money. Desperation is understandable. But I do question whether we should be comfortable with someone in such desperate financial circumstances having access to sensitive negotiations and confidential information. I question whether she saw this as a professional opportunity or a personal one. The whispers grew louder, some sympathetic, some scandalized. After all, Nadine said, looking at Rashid, she's been cleaning the Crown Prince's suite 3 times a week for 6 months. She would have heard conversations, seen documents, understood the pressure he was under. That's very convenient timing, don't you think? To suddenly appear when the need was most desperate. That's enough. Rashid stood, his voice thunderous. But Nadine wasn't finished. I'm not accusing Miss Qasim of anything improper. I'm simply suggesting that we should all be aware of the full situation. Desperation can make people do questionable things. It can make them see opportunities where perhaps they shouldn't. She raised her glass. So let's toast Miss Kasim's success today. But let's also be clear-eyed about what happened and why. Layla stood. Her legs felt shaky, but her voice was steady. Every eye in the room was on her. Everything Lady Nadine said is true, Layla said clearly. I am a Yemeni refugee. I did flee the war with nothing. I do clean hotel rooms for minimum wage. I do support 2 siblings in a refugee camp because they have no one else. She looked around the room, meeting eyes, refusing to look away. I did need this money desperately. $50,000 would catch me up on months of overdue payments. It would give me breathing room. It would possibly let me bring my brother and sister to safety. So yes, I had motivations beyond simple professional interest. Some of the guests were nodding now, their expressions softening. But I didn't manipulate anyone, Layla continued. His Highness offered me a job. I did that job to the best of my ability. I never asked for anything beyond our agreed payment, and I'm not ashamed of cleaning rooms or working 3 jobs or doing whatever it takes to care for the people I love. That's not opportunism, that's called family, that's called survival. She turned to look at Rashid. I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave me today, Your Highness, truly grateful. But Lady Nadine is right about one thing. I don't belong in this world. This was always temporary. Miss Qasim, Rashid started. Thank you for everything, Layla said. I hope the partnership succeeds. She set down her napkin and walked out of the ballroom. Her head was high. Her steps were steady, but inside she was breaking into pieces. Behind her, she heard Morrison's voice rising in anger. That was one of the cruelest things I've witnessed in 30 years of business. She heard other voices, some defending her, some uncertain. But she didn't look back. She just kept walking. Layla made it to the staff locker room before the tears came. She leaned against her locker, breathing hard, trying to hold herself together. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, appeared in the doorway. Layla, what happened? Someone said you were at the royal celebration? I was translating for them, Layla managed to say. They invited me to celebrate. It was a mistake. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm always fine. Layla opened her locker and pulled out her cleaning uniform. I just need to get back to work. Honey, take the night off. I'll cover your rooms. No, Layla's voice was firm. I need to work, please. I need to feel normal again. Mrs. Chen hesitated, then nodded. If you're sure. I'm sure. Work is the one thing I understand, the one place where expectations are clear and I know exactly what's expected of me. She changed out of her formal dress and into her uniform. The transformation felt symbolic. She was taking off the costume, returning to reality. This was who she really was, a housekeeper, not a princess at the ball. She was just finishing buttoning her uniform when she heard footsteps, heavy, purposeful footsteps that didn't belong in the staff area. The door opened. Rashid stood there, still in his formal attire, completely out of place in the shabby locker room. What are you doing here? Layla asked, shocked. You can't be in the staff areas. I don't care about protocol right now. Your celebration means nothing without you there. He stepped closer. Nadine has been dismissed from my service. Her engagement to me is over. She's being sent back to Zaran tonight. That's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary. What she did was unforgivable. Layla shook her head. She told the truth, Your Highness. Everything she said was accurate. I am all those things she described, and none of them are shameful. Maybe not to you, but to your world, I'm nobody. I'm worse than nobody. I'm someone who doesn't fit, who doesn't belong, who makes everyone uncomfortable because I blur the lines they need to keep clear. I don't care about lines. Yes, you do. You have to. You're a crown prince. I'm a refugee who cleans toilets. This isn't a fairy tale, Rashid. This is real life. And in real life, we live in completely different worlds. It was the first time she'd used his name without the title. He noticed. Say that again, he said quietly. Say what? My name. You called me Rashid. Layla felt her throat tighten. I shouldn't have. No, you should have, because that's who I am when I'm with you, not the prince, not the crown prince, just Rashid. That's exactly the problem. You can't be just Rashid. You have responsibilities, obligations, a country depending on you. And I have siblings who need me. We both have real lives that don't include fairy tale endings. Rashid reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was old, faded, the edges worn from years of handling. I need to show you something, he said. Something I should have realized weeks ago. What is it? He held out the photograph. Look at this, really look. Layla took it, studying the image. It showed a group of people standing in front of a desert landscape. Mountains in the background, palm trees, traditional buildings. Hadramaut. Definitely Hadramaut. She recognized the distinctive architecture of Shibam. In the center of the photo were two children. A boy around 8 years old in expensive clothes that marked him as wealthy, and a little girl, maybe 6, in a simple dress grinning at the camera. Behind them were adults. Layla's heart stopped as she recognized them. That's my father, she whispered, and my mother. And that's me. And that's me, Rashid said. You're Layla Qasim, daughter of Hassan Qasim. Your father worked with my father in the Hadramaut oil fields. You taught me how to speak real Arabic when I was 8 and you were 6. You said I talked like a palace ghost, not a real person. Layla's hands were shaking. Memories were flooding back now, memories she'd buried because they were too painful to remember. A lonely boy from the palace who came to visit when their fathers worked together. A boy who spoke formal, stiff Arabic until she taught him the real words, the street words, the words that made him sound human. Little Rashid, she whispered. You were the sad boy who was always alone. And you were the girl who wasn't afraid of princes. The girl who made me sit in your father's workshop and learn the real language. The coffee ritual, the proverbs, everything real I know about my own culture you taught me. I forgot, Layla said, tears streaming down her face now. We left when I was so young. The war came. Everything fell apart. I forgot about the boy from the palace. I never forgot, Rashid said quietly. Your father saved my father's life in a drilling accident. That's why I kept this photo all these years. Your family mattered to mine. You mattered to me. He stepped closer. When you quoted that proverb today, trust is built stone by stone. That's when I started to remember my mother used to say that. Your mother taught it to her. They were friends. Layla couldn't stop the tears now. My mother. She used to talk about the lady from the palace. She said your mother was kind, that she didn't act superior. I'd forgotten that too. You told me once that home isn't a palace or a title, Rashid said. Home is where someone knows your real name and speaks your heart language. I've been looking for home ever since you left, Layla. Living in palaces but homeless. Rashid, you walked back into my life 20 years later and suddenly I felt home again. I just didn't realize why until now. They stood in the shabby locker room, the photograph between them bridging 2 decades and 2 completely different lives. This doesn't change anything, Layla said, but her voice lacked conviction. We're still from different worlds. We're from the same world. We're both from Hadramaut. We both lost something precious when the war came. We're both trying to build something new from the rubble. You're a crown prince. And you're the girl who taught me how to be human. The girl who made me understand that dignity comes from character, not titles. The girl who's still teaching me those lessons even now. Layla looked down at the photograph, at the two children who had no idea what the future would bring. How loss would find them both. How they'd end up in a Chicago hotel locker room 2 decades later trying to figure out if the past could give them a future. I need time, she finally said. This is too much. The photograph, the memories, everything that happened tonight. I need time to think. Take all the time you need, Rashid said. But know this, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not giving up on us. There is no us, Rashid. There's you and your crown and me and my survival. Then let's figure out how to make those things fit together. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. You said I walked past you for 6 months without seeing you. You were right. I'm sorry for that. But I see you now, Layla. I see all of you. And I'm not going to stop seeing you just because it's complicated. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. The $50,000 will be in your account tomorrow morning. You earned it. No matter what you decide about anything else, that money is yours. Rashid. And there's something else. I've been working on something for the past 2 weeks, something I was going to tell you after the deal closed, but after tonight, I think you should know now. What is it? Your siblings. I've had my legal team working with immigration attorneys. Their visa applications have been expedited. They'll be in Chicago in 6 weeks. Layla felt her legs go weak. She sat down hard on the bench. What? I'm not trying to buy you, Layla. I'm trying to help family. Because that's what we are, whether you accept it or not. Our fathers were friends. Our mothers were friends. We were friends once. And friends help each other. You did this without telling me? I did it because it's the right thing to do, whether you forgive me or not, whether you choose Morrison's offer or mine or neither. Your siblings deserve to be with you. That's not about us. It's about them. He left before she could respond. The door closed quietly behind him. Layla sat in the empty locker room holding the photograph, crying for everything lost and everything found and everything still uncertain. She'd come to America 3 years ago with nothing. Tomorrow she'd wake up with $50,000, 2 job offers, and the knowledge that the lonely boy she'd befriended 20 years ago had never forgotten her. She had no idea what to do with any of it. But for the first time in 3 years, Layla Qasim felt something she'd forgotten how to feel. Hope. 2 weeks passed. Layla continued working her 3 jobs, though the $50,000 had cleared and was sitting in her bank account like a promise of something different. She'd paid off all her overdue payments to her siblings' camp. She'd caught up on rent. She'd even bought herself a new winter coat because her old one had been held together with safety pins. But she hadn't called Morrison about his job offer. And she hadn't responded to the formal letter from Rashid's legal team about the position with Zaran's royal household. She was stuck, frozen, unable to move forward because the past had suddenly become present, and she didn't know how to reconcile the girl she'd been with the woman she'd become. What she didn't know was that Rashid had been working, quietly, without pressure, without contact, just actions. He'd established the Qasim al-Zarani Translator Certification Institute, a program that would recognize degrees from conflict regions and provide pathways to professional certification for refugees and immigrants. The first class would start in 3 months, with full scholarships for 20 students. He'd worked with immigration attorneys to not just expedite her siblings' visas, but to create a broader program bringing refugee families together. Yasmin and Omar would be 2 of the first 50 beneficiaries. He'd donated $5 million to the Jordanian refugee camp where her siblings had been staying, funding educational programs and medical facilities. He hadn't told Layla about any of it. He was just doing what needed to be done, expecting nothing in return. but word had gotten back to her anyway. Mrs. Chen, her supervisor, had heard from the hotel management that a substantial anonymous donation had been made to cover college tuition for hotel staff and their families. Morrison had called to tell her about a new foundation supporting refugee entrepreneurs. A reporter had reached out asking for comments about the translator certification program. Layla knew who was behind it all, and she didn't know whether to be grateful or angry that he was solving problems without her permission. She was thinking about all of this at 5:30 on a Thursday morning, standing on the hotel's rooftop garden. It was her secret place, the spot she came to after her overnight shift ended. She'd watch the sun rise over Lake Michigan and think about Yemen, about her parents, about the life she'd lost and the life she was building. She heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "How did you know I come here?" she asked. Rashid came to stand beside her at the railing. "I've been watching, not spying, just hoping you'd let me talk to you again." "You've been busy," Layla said. "The Certification Institute, the Refugee Family Reunification Program, the camp donation, the Staff Scholarship Fund. You heard about that." "People talk, Your Highness." "Rashid," he corrected gently. "Just Rashid." They stood in silence, watching the sky lighten from deep blue to purple to pink. "Why did you do all those things?" Layla finally asked. "Because they needed to be done." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer that matters." Rashid turned to look at her. "You faced a broken system. Instead of just helping you, I decided to fix the system, not for you specifically, for everyone like you. That's very noble. It's practical. How many other brilliant people are cleaning hotel rooms because their degrees aren't recognized? How many families are separated because visa systems move too slowly? Helping you solve these problems means helping thousands of others. That's not charity, Layla. It's common sense." Layla was quiet for a moment. "My siblings arrive in 4 weeks. I heard? Thank you for that, truly. You don't need to thank me. Hassan Qasim saved my father's life. This is the least I can do for his children." The sun was fully rising now, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Layla had watched this sunrise hundreds of times, but somehow it looked different today. "When we were children in Hadramaut," Rashid said quietly, "you told me something I've never forgotten. You said home isn't a palace or a title. Home is where someone knows your real name and speaks your heart language." I was 6. I probably didn't understand what I was saying. You understood perfectly. You always understood things the rest of us missed. He turned to face her fully. "You've been my home since I was 8 years old, Layla. I just didn't realize it until you walked back into my life 20 years later." "Rashid, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I'm not asking you to be a princess. I'm not asking you to fit into my world. I'm asking you to build a new world with me. One where refugees are welcomed, where women lead, where education matters more than bloodlines, where people like you get the opportunities they deserve, not because of charity, but because it's right." Layla felt tears prick her eyes. "That's a beautiful dream." "It's not a dream, it's a plan. And I can't do it alone. I need someone who knows what it's like to fight for survival. Someone who sees the cracks in the system because they've fallen through them. Someone who isn't afraid to call me a palace ghost when I need to hear it. You want a reformer, not a wife. I want both. I want you specifically because you're the only one who speaks my heart language, the only one who knows my real name." Layla turned to face him and there were tears on her cheeks now. "This is crazy." "Completely crazy," Rashid agreed, "but marry me anyway." "I have conditions. I expected nothing less. My siblings come first, always. No matter what royal duties or obligations arise, they come first. Agreed. I finish my degree properly, get the certifications, build my own career. I'm not going to be someone's decorative wife. I'd be disappointed if you tried. And if your advisors give me trouble, if anyone tries to make me smaller or quieter or more convenient, I'm allowed to tell them exactly where to shove their protocol. Rashid laughed. I insist that you do. I'm serious, Rashid. I won't be tamed. I won't be made into something I'm not. I don't want you tamed. I want you exactly as you are, fierce, brilliant, stubborn, impossible, and completely yourself. Layla studied his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. She found none. One more condition, she said, anything. When you're being an idiot, I'm allowed to speak to you in Hadrami and call you a palace ghost, no matter who's listening. I'd be hurt if you didn't. He smiled. Is that a yes? Layla took a deep breath. She thought about the girl she'd been, the daughter of an engineer growing up in the shadow of ancient cities. She thought about the woman she'd become, a refugee, a survivor, a woman who'd built something from nothing. And she thought about the boy who'd been lonely in a palace, and the man who'd never forgotten the girl who taught him how to be real. Yes, Rashid, she said in Hadrami. It's a yes. He pulled her into his arms and they kissed as the sun rose over Chicago, turning the world golden. When they finally pulled apart, Rashid rested his forehead against hers. You know this is going to be complicated. Everything worth doing is complicated. My father will have opinions. I'm sure he will. I'll handle them. The royal court will gossip. Let them. I've survived worse than gossip. Some people will never accept you. Their acceptance isn't required for me to do my job or live my life. Rashid pulled back to look at her. Have I mentioned that you're extraordinary? Once or twice, but I wouldn't mind hearing it again. 3 months later, Layla and Rashid stood in the village of Al-Qatn in Hadramaut, in front of the same mountains that appeared in the photograph. They were getting married where they'd first met, where their fathers had worked together, where 2 children had become friends without knowing how their lives would intertwine decades later. It was a small ceremony. Yasmin and Omar were there, safe and thriving, still adjusting to their new life in America, but grateful to witness their sister's happiness. Rashid's mother attended, her eyes filled with joyful tears as she watched her son marry the daughter of the man who'd saved her husband's life. Morrison flew in from Chicago, along with Dr. Chen and Gerald Fitzpatrick. Even Mrs. Chen, Layla's supervisor, made the trip. The people who'd seen Layla at her lowest were there to celebrate her at her highest. Layla wore a traditional Hadrami wedding dress, and Rashid wore the formal attire of his region. They spoke their vows in Hadrami, in the language of their childhood, the language of their hearts. I promise to speak your heart language every day, Rashid said, to remember where we came from, to build with you stone by stone, year by year. I promise to teach you real words when you sound like a palace ghost, Layla said, and the guests laughed. To be your home, to challenge you, support you, and remind you what matters. To build with you today and always. After the ceremony, as they walked through the village with their guests, an old woman approached them. She'd known Layla's parents. She'd known Rashid's family. Your fathers would be so proud, she said in Hadrami. Hassan and Mohammed, they would see this and know that some things the war couldn't destroy. Some connections run deeper than conflict. That night, under desert stars, Rashid and Layla sat together and talked about the future they would build. Not just for themselves, but for others like them. 3 years later, Layla stood in a bright classroom in downtown Chicago facing 30 students. They ranged in age from 19 to 52. They came from Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, Venezuela, Myanmar. They all had degrees from their home countries that weren't recognized in America. They all had skills that were being wasted. "You are not where you came from," Layla said, speaking in English but occasionally slipping into Arabic, her voice warm and firm. "You are not what you've lost. You are what you choose to build next." A young woman raised her hand. "But Miss Layla, what if people don't believe in us? What if they only see where we've been, not where we're going?" Layla smiled. "Then you prove them wrong. Not by arguing, not by demanding recognition, but by being so undeniably competent that they have no choice but to see you." She walked to the whiteboard and wrote a proverb in Arabic, then translated it. "Al-thika tubna hajaran hajaran." Trust is built stone by stone. So is respect. So is a new life. You don't build it overnight. You build it through consistent, excellent work. Through showing up every day, through refusing to be invisible. At the back of the classroom, Rashid slipped in quietly. He often did this, coming to watch Layla teach. She noticed him but didn't acknowledge him, continuing her lecture. "My father was a petroleum engineer," Layla said. "When I was young, I asked him why he memorized so many technical specifications. He said, 'Because when someone challenges my competence, I want to know more than they do. I want to be so prepared that their doubts look foolish, not my abilities.'" She looked around the room. "That's what we're doing here. We're making you so prepared, so skilled, so undeniably competent that doors open. Not because of charity, not because of sympathy, but because organizations need what you can provide." After class ended and the students filed out, Rashid approached her. "You're getting better at this," he said. "The teaching. I had a good example. My father taught me that knowledge isn't power unless you share it. The students love you. The students see themselves in me. They know I'm not speaking theory, I've lived it." They walked together toward the exit. Through the windows, Layla could see the sign for the building, the Qasim al-Zarani Center for Refugee Education and Integration. 3 floors of classrooms, certification programs, job placement services, legal aid, and counseling. In 3 years, they'd helped 847 refugees and immigrants get professional certification and employment. Yasmin worked here now, managing the student services program while finishing her own degree in social work. Omar was in his 2nd year at Northwestern, studying engineering like his father. "The foundation wants to expand to 3 more cities," Rashid said as they walked. "Los Angeles, Houston, and Minneapolis." "We should," Layla agreed. "The need is there. It'll require more fundraising, more traveling. I can handle it. We can handle it." They stepped outside into the Chicago afternoon. A year ago, Layla had officially become Director of International Relations for Zaran, a position that allowed her to split time between Chicago and the Gulf. She negotiated deals, built partnerships, and served as a bridge between cultures. Morrison had tried to hire her away twice more, but she'd politely declined. She'd found where she belonged. "There's a state dinner in Washington next week," Rashid said. "The president wants to discuss Middle East partnerships. He specifically requested that you attend." "The president requested me?" Layla smiled. "Remember when I was cleaning hotel rooms? I remember when 8 professional translators failed and a housekeeper saved $1 billion deal. That housekeeper has come a long way. That housekeeper was always extraordinary. The world just took a while to notice." They reached their car. But before getting in, Layla turned to look back at the center. Through the windows, she could see students gathering in study groups, advisors meeting with clients, lives being rebuilt stone by stone. "Your father would be proud," Rashid said quietly. "Of all of this. Of you. So would yours. They built things in Hadramaut together. Now we're building things here. Different things, but the same spirit." Layla took his hand. "Stone by stone. Year by year. They drove home through Chicago traffic, talking about the expansion plans, the state dinner, the meeting Layla had next week with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. Their life was busy, complicated, full of obligations and opportunities and the constant balancing act of building something meaningful. But it was theirs, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared history, and the understanding that the most important bridges are the ones between people, not places. That night in their apartment overlooking the lake, Layla found Rashid looking at the old photograph, the one of 2 children in Hadramaut 20 years ago. "Do you ever wonder what those kids would think of us now?" Layla asked, sitting beside him. "I think they'd be surprised," Rashid said. "The lonely prince and the engineer's daughter building a life together in America. I think they'd be proud. We didn't forget where we came from." "No," Rashid agreed. "We just built something new on top of it." He set down the photograph and pulled Layla close. "Thank you for teaching me how to speak my heart language, then and now. Thank you for never forgetting the girl who made you human." Outside the city, lights sparkled like stars. Inside, 2 people who'd been lost in different ways had found their way home. Not to a place, not to a palace or a country or a specific building, but to each other. And that, as it turned out, was the most important home of all. What did you think of Layla and Rashid's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And check out more emotional stories by clicking right here on the final screen.